So when you hear the words high intelligence, what pops into your head? Probably effortless success, right? Unshakable confidence? Well, in this explainer, we're going to flip that whole idea on its head. We're going to dive into the psychological reality of a high IQ and how, for many, it feels less like a superpower and a lot more like a quiet, constant struggle. This quote, man, it just nails it. For a lot of highly intelligent people, their inner world isn't about having all the answers. It's about wrestling with way more questions. So, this isn't a story about flaws. It's a story about a brain that's just wired differently. Okay, so here's our roadmap. First, we'll bust the whole myth of the genius stereotype. Then we'll go deep into the inner world, looking at the internal battles of a mind that's always on. After that, we'll see how that affects the social experience. And finally, we'll put it all together to reframe this whole thing into a new way of understanding a deeper, more complex life.
All right, first things first. Before we can even begin to get the real struggles, we have to tear down the Hollywood version of genius. You know, that caricature, it completely misses the point. The deeply human and, yeah, often difficult experience of what's really going on behind a high IQ.
This slide just lays it all out, doesn't it? The gap between what we think it is and what it is. We're sold this idea of effortless success, but the reality is a brain that literally never shuts off. We picture social dominance, but the experience is more often a cognitive mismatch. And that unwavering confidence? Nope. It's usually replaced by some really deep self-questioning. So let's see how this all plays out on the inside. This is where the stereotypes just melt away and the real, raw psychological experience begins. We're going to go inside the mind and look at four very common internal battles. We are going to break down chronic overthinking, that constant search for mental stimulation, a surprising link to really intense emotions, and the huge paradox of deep-seated self-doubt. And these aren't just separate things, they're all connected, part of the same mental landscape. Does this sound familiar? That feeling that your mind is running a full-on marathon, even when you're just trying to watch a movie. You're replaying conversations, you're analyzing every possible future, looking for patterns in absolutely everything. It is exhausting. But why does it happen? And here is the key. This isn't some kind of flaw or anxiety disorder. It's a processing feature. A high IQ brain is just built to juggle more variables at the same time. This constant analysis isn't a bug. It's a direct result of the system's sheer horsepower. Let's talk about boredom for a sec. You know, for a lot of people, routine is safe, it's comforting. But for a highly active mind, oh man, routine tasks or surface-level chats can feel unbelievably draining. It's like this constant hunger for something more, something challenging. And here's why. Think of the brain as a high-performance engine. It needs high-octane fuel. Simple, repetitive stuff just doesn't cut it. It doesn't give the engine what it needs to run smoothly. It craves complexity, it craves novelty, just to feel engaged and, alive. Okay, this one's a biggie, and it's where a lot of misunderstanding comes from. Have you ever been told you're too sensitive or just too intense? Well, it turns out there's a really strong psychological link between high intelligence and how deeply you feel things. Pay attention to that phrase, heightened emotional processing. See, it's not about being less in control, it's about being more analytical. You're analyzing your own feelings, your internal data, with the same depth you use for external problems. That leads to a richer, but a much more intense emotional life. And here it is, the great paradox. You can be brilliant, you can solve incredibly complex problems, and yet you are your own worst critic. This constant second-guessing can feel like a total contradiction, but it's actually rooted in the very nature of intelligence itself. It's kind of like the Dunning-Kruger effect, but in reverse. The more you truly learn, the more you become painfully aware of the vast ocean of things you don't know. This intellectual humility isn't a weakness. It's a sign that your mind is big enough to see its own limits. And that awareness? Well, that's what fuels the self-doubt. Okay, so we've explored the inner world. Now, let's take a look at how all these internal traits start showing up in our interactions with other people. This is where those internal struggles become external challenges, and it creates a really unique social experience. We're going to hit three major social hurdles. That feeling of being totally out of sync in conversations, a really powerful sensitivity to things that just don't make sense, and that profound, often lonely feeling of being fundamentally misunderstood.
You've been there, right? You're in a conversation and you feel like you're 5 moves ahead in a chess game. You already see where it's going, you've connected all the dots, and you're just waiting for everyone else to catch up. It can be super frustrating and honestly pretty isolating.
And it's so important to get this. This isn't arrogance. Psychology calls it a social mismatch. It's a literal difference in the speed and the abstract nature of your thoughts. Your mind is just operating on a different frequency, which makes it a real challenge to sync up. Inefficient systems at work, contradictions in what someone's telling you, rules that are clearly illogical, these things don't just annoy you, do they? They can cause this deep, almost physical frustration. It feels like someone is breaking a fundamental rule of how the world is supposed to work. And this right here is the source of that frustration. Your brain's powerful pattern recognition ability is always on. So when it spots a break in the pattern, like a logical flaw or someone contradicting themselves, it sends up this massive red flag. This sensitivity is actually a strength, even if it feels like a frustration. This might be the toughest struggle of all. It's this deep loneliness that can hit you even when you're in a room full of people. You try to explain what's in your head, but it feels like something essential always gets lost in translation. And the reason for this is so simple, but it's also incredibly profound. Your thoughts aren't simple. They have layers, they're complex, they're full of nuance. The challenge isn't really one of communication, it's one of translation. It's like you're trying to describe a 3D object using only 2D words. Of course something's going to get lost. So, we've gone through the internal battles and the external challenges. And I get it, it can sound pretty bleak, a really tough experience. But what if we've been looking at all of this the wrong way? Let's try to reframe this entire picture. This is the whole point. These struggles aren't signs that something is wrong with you. They're symptoms of a mind that just experiences the world with more depth, with more weight, and with a heck of a lot more complexity. It's not an easier life, no way, but it is a deeper one. And so I'm going to leave you with this final thought to chew on. If all this overthinking and the emotional intensity and the self-doubt, if they aren't flaws to be fixed, but maybe tools for a deeper understanding, then what are the big questions that your mind is uniquely equipped to explore? Thanks for joining me.